A word of warning, this podcast explores graphic and disturbing stories and includes some strong language. It therefore may not be suitable for our young listeners or other folks who may find it disturbing. Hello and welcome to True Crime News, the podcast covering high-profile and under-the-radar cases from across the country every week. I'm your host, Anna Garcia. Our case this week: when nothing else works, try paying someone to put a spell on your wife so she won't leave you. The spells didn't work and the wife's body was never found, meaning she went missing, and her husband has just been convicted of first-degree murder. But a guilty verdict in this murder case of a missing mom is not enough. Her family says that there can't be justice until they locate their loved one. 5 years ago, the family went to the media when the mom went missing, and now they need your help to locate her remains so she can be laid to rest. We are recording this on Friday, July 17th of 2026. Our guest today is Nima Rahmani, a former federal prosecutor, president, and co-founder of the West Coast Trial Lawyers, a legal analyst that you can see on multiple media outlets. Nima, it is such a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Anna, so excited to be on with you. What a case.
What a case indeed. Now, this is a case that we really have heard of for the last 5 years. It made massive headlines, not only in California, but across the country. When you have a mother of three who's young, who's missing, and the last time she was seen was going into her house, and then she's never seen coming out, you got to wonder, well, where did she go?
No question. I remember this case distinctively. It was during the pandemic. We were all home. And, I'm sitting here in Los Angeles, but I was a prosecutor for many years in San Diego. And this was a Chulo Vista mom who was missing. And then slowly, more evidence came out and the family members started talking to the media. And then it became pretty clear that, we may be dealing with foul play. And the question was, what's law enforcement doing? Where is she? Where is the body? And ultimately, as you said, Anna, we never found the body. But that doesn't mean that we didn't get justice in this case.
Right. And from the family's perspective, of course, justice is always imperfect. But the final part for them will be to find their Maya. Until they find her, they cannot rest either. And I really appreciate this family tremendously, because not only is it obvious how close they all are and how much they love each other, they really were faced with something no family's ever prepared for someone to go missing. And then all of a sudden you find yourself, negotiating with reporters and the media and press conferences and the police. And you're not an expert in any of these things, but the one thing you do know is that you're never going to get justice or find your loved one unless you scream, and you are constantly pushing this to the forefront. And they really kept the pressure up. This isn't a knock against law enforcement by any means, but I just don't know if things would have progressed as quickly as they did, even though it seems like forever, had the family not pushed so hard.
I think that's really important, Anna. You raised two important points. The first is the public pressure campaign. And look, and we've seen it time and time again how, something like Dateline or 48 Hours or a documentary can really change the course of a legal case, right? Britney Spears, R. Kelly, right? I mean, there's so many cases, the Menendez brothers, right? So the political reality is, and look, I'm not saying the San Diego DA did anything wrong, but every prosecutor in this country is elected or appointed by someone who is. So that pressure can make a big difference when there's a mom missing and law enforcement haven't seemingly done much. There's an outcry. I mean, it happened here in LA in the David case, right? Celeste Rivas was missing for some period of time. She was found in the front of his Tesla, allegedly, right? And there was a real sort of outcry here in LA, like there's a young girl missing. So you're right. So I think the public pressure does make a difference, and it's important. And the other thing that you mentioned is sort of the negotiation. I want to talk about another type of negotiation. Now that he's been convicted, the question always is, and he hasn't been sentenced, right?
Correct.
Do you cut some sort of deal or a recommendation at sentencing in exchange for him telling the family where the body is? That's always a real tough question that prosecutors and victims have to really grapple with.
Yes, and I am always appreciative of the prosecutors, the district attorneys, who really listen to what the families want. And I've seen both, just like you have. I've seen families that they're like, no, you're rotting in hell. I'm not negotiating with the devil. And then you have other families who are like, I just want to find him or her. Just tell me. And this case is very complicated because the family was very, very close with him, the husband, the in-law, if you will. And for them, it has been a lot of grief to process the possibility that someone whom you loved, like a brother, a son, anything like that, an uncle, could have done this to your blood relative. So I'm very much hoping that they continue to listen to the family. And I don't know, look, it's not, no matter what deal he gets, it's not like it's going to be a sweet deal. It's first degree murder.
Yeah. It's 25 to life, right? So the question is he ever going to see the light of day? Is there a possibility of parole? Ultimately, of course, it's up to the judge, but I think the prosecution's recommendation goes a long way. And frankly, look, the defense post-conviction, because there's multiple possibilities here, right? There was first-degree murder, like you mentioned, the most serious in California. Yeah, there was second degree, there was manslaughter, voluntary, involuntary. There were lesser includeds that the jury could have landed on. Obviously, they returned a very quick, in my opinion, given the length of the case, first degree murder conviction, the top count. So the defense has lost a lot of leverage here. Obviously, they're going to take their chance on an appeal. But again, I don't see any clear legal errors here that would reverse this conviction. It was pretty strong case, albeit a circumstantial one, because like you said, there's evidence of real jealousy. There's obviously the potential for the divorce. You have this motive. You have some inconsistent, at best, statements, outright lies. And then, of course, I think one thing jurors always hang their hat on in these types of cases, it could be Casey Anthony, it could be Scott Peterson, is, well, is this conduct consistent with someone who is looking for their missing spouse or child, right? And the fact that he didn't participate in any of those searches, I think was very important. So, look, sometimes it takes defendants a while to come around, and maybe the defense here might reach out to the prosecution and try to negotiate a deal like that. We'll see if the San Diego DA is receptive to that. I think a lot will depend on the victim's family.
Yeah, absolutely. So here are the details. The victim here is 39-year-old Maya Millete, and the convicted killer is her husband, 44-year-old Larry Millete. So the jurors deliberated for one day, and they found him guilty of first-degree murder, even though police do not know how she was killed. They really don't know where she was killed. But again, we know she went into the house based on security cameras on January 7th of 2021 and was never seen coming out. So the theory is she was killed in the house and that he disposed of her body. And what's really creepy here is if you narrow it down to January 7th and then the next day and maybe 3 days total that we're operating on, the kids would have been home. There were 3 children in the home when all of this happened, which to me is so frightening.
It really is. And like you said, the kids were home. The family members were concerned. They came to the home. Larry told them at some point that, Maya's in a room, room's locked, and then sort of ended up giving sort of different stories, right? Then she's at the beach. And ultimately, I think the prosecution's theory was that Larry obviously knew where the cameras were. He backed up his SUV in a way that it was outside of the view of those cameras. I think there was some evidence that maybe Maya was poisoned. I don't think we ever had necessarily a definitive answer there because obviously we don't have a body, right? But I think the defense really was up against it because of some of the things that you talked about, the witchcraft and the spells and all that evidence. But ultimately, and again, I know it's the prosecution's burden. They have to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt, but jurors are ordinary people. They want some reasonable alternate theory in this case. And the two the defense presented really didn't make a whole lot of sense. One was that someone else managed to get into the house and kill her and then get her out of the house without, any cameras, not just in the home, but in the neighborhood,
Right.
seeing anything, right? That didn't make a whole lot of sense. The other was that this was some type of gone girl situation where a loving mom was just going to take off and disappear. Again, in a way where no one can find her.
Disappeared without her vehicle, without any of her belongings, and with a birthday for one of her kids at around the same time. Parents don't just leave it around their kid's birthday. I mean, it's possible, sure, but that was so out of character for Maya. It's ludicrous.
Absolutely. I mean, here's someone that was a civilian employee of the Navy, just consistent, has never shown any type of erratic behavior. It just made no sense. Look, is it possible? I mean, we saw, I think, Sherry Papini. I mean, it certainly can happen.
Yeah.
But I think it just didn't make a whole lot of sense under these circumstances with really no evidence whatsoever to show anyone leaving the house that was alive. I think the prosecution did a real good job showing that it was likely that, something happened in the home and that Larry ended up driving out to the desert, Glamis or someplace like that, somewhere near the Native American reservations, and really disposed of this body, even though it was never found.
I know, I know. And even one of the jurors who was interviewed afterwards kept saying, I believe her body's in the desert. I really believe that. And it's always so interesting to me to hear from the jurors. I'm always so pleased when they speak because the one thing that we never have insight to is what's going on in that jury room. And I'm sure as a prosecutor for you, it was the same thing. It's like you really want to know everything going on in there, and you'll only learn what's shared with you, but you'll never fully get it, right?
Oh yeah, I would love to be a juror, obviously. It's very unlikely that anyone's going to choose me or really any
Oh,
attorney.
I would choose you.
Oh, thank you, Anna. You're the best. But yeah, you don't know. It's really a black box. So, sometimes the jurors will stick around and talk to you. Oftentimes they don't. And when they do, the insights that they give, I mean, it's so telling. As an attorney, you think, wow, this is the most important evidence of the case, and this is what's going to win the day for us. And then they'll come back and say, well, no, we cared about these other things entirely, right? Or you think a particular piece of evidence or a witness is going to be strong, and they don't necessarily agree. So it's certainly an art, not a science, and it's very fascinating when you get the opportunity to talk to the jurors. I certainly love it in any case, whether they talk to me, obviously a very high profile case like this, they talk to the media, and they really explain not only how they got to where they did, but sometimes they'll even provide more insight. Like in this particular case, they said that they took an initial vote and it was pretty much overwhelming. And they decided to just, I think one juror wanted to sleep on it.
They wanted to sleep on it and see how they felt the next morning. I love that. I love that.
I love it too. And again, typically you don't know. You have no idea. And you're just sort of on pins and needles as an attorney. Again, I think the prosecution had a strong case. I think that they probably felt pretty good about it, especially quick verdict in a case like this usually is a state verdict. But the fact that you had the jurors talk to the media, provide this information, I absolutely love that as a trial lawyer.
So let's get into a little bit of the background and then we'll get into the details of how things were revealed in real time. So Larry and Maya married in Honolulu in May of 2000, and they were still really kind of teens, very young adults when they were married. Maya was 19, Larry 18, and they were high school sweethearts. So they've been together a long time, 21 years, and they were raising 3 children together. They spent a lot of time with their extended families. So everything seemed rather perfect, beautiful, young family. So what could the motive be here if everything seems so perfect on the outside? And, according to prosecutors, Maya wanted out of the marriage because she claimed that Larry could be abusive, and Maya was also having an affair with a coworker at the time of this. So on the day she was killed, Maya had called a divorce lawyer to make an appointment, which of course she never made because she disappeared. And just for you to understand the family at the time, the kids, 3 of them, at the time that this happened, were 4, 9, and 11. It's really young. I mean, it's It's old enough to know if something weird's going on in the house, but it's still very young. So Larry worked as an optician at the Naval Medical Training Center in San Diego. Maya was a civilian employee with the Department of Defense, specifically an administrative specialist with the Navy. So there were allegations, as you said, Nima, that Larry was jealous, controlling, even abusive, tried to keep her under her thumb. Maya told those who were closest to her that if anything ever happens, you should look at Larry. I always find this the most fascinating because it sounds like something out of a Dateline episode, right? And it also sounds like something out of a Lifetime movie, but people really do say these things to their loved ones.
They do. And like you said, I mean, this was really sort of the American dream to Filipino Americans. They meet in high school sweethearts. They both end up working for the government. Obviously, there's a big employer there in San Diego, and everything seems great on the surface. The in-laws are obviously involved, very close-knit, extended family as well. But I think we know as prosecutors, today's domestic violence is tomorrow's murder. And anyone who follows true crime knows that, if a husband or a wife disappears, usually the first suspect is the spouse, right? I mean, I think that's sort of a tale as old as time. Now you add an affair on top of this, allegedly, and then you add the evidence that she's talking to family members about a divorce, is contacting a divorce attorney. Then all of a sudden, you have all the elements that you need for a no body murder case. I think, sometimes people say, well, look, it's difficult to prove a case without a body. And obviously, you want a body as a prosecutor and law enforcement for so many reasons. But I think you had all the ingredients here, Anna, and enough people that knew about it. And frankly, some of Larry's really damaging messages to the spellcasters. I mean, and it kept getting sort of increasingly worse. First, I think he wants her to stay. Then he doesn't want her to leave. Then he's trying to cast spells on. He wants her incapacitated in a way she can't, like, physically leave the house. He obviously knows about the other man and wants spells to be cast on him. So you really kind of get into a state of mind that you don't typically see. Now, I think with like AI and ChatGPT, we are seeing this more now where people are communicating with their phones. But again, normally you don't have these types of messages for a murder defendant, but you did in this particular case.
As many cases as I have covered on this podcast, we've done something like more than 500 podcasts here on True Crime News. Nima, I do not remember a case with spellcasters. Oh, there's been some witchcraft. There have been some voodoo dolls. But this whole world of spellcasters, I don't know. I guess when I'm just, doom scrolling, somehow I miss this whole spellcaster industry, this cottage industry.
I hadn't heard about it either until this case. I didn't know it exists. You see the jokes and the memes. I'm gonna pay someone to put a spell on my World Cup opponent, right? I always thought it was a joke, but apparently there are people that do this, and you can pay them. I think he paid more than $1,000 for these series of spells. So, look, you learn something new every day, and like you said, Anna, I've been doing this 25 years. This is the first time I'd ever heard of such a thing, and it was in this particular case.
I know. It is the weirdest. There are a lot of weird things, but that to me is just and it's fascinating what his spells are and what his wishes are, to the point that he's like an adolescent. He's like a child. Incapacitate her so she needs me because that's the only time she's nice to me, is what he wrote. I'm like, you are such a man-child.
No question. And, you have that sort of emotional immaturity on one hand, and then you have lots of firearms in the house too, on the other. So, and again, I don't necessarily think that Maya was shot. There wasn't necessarily evidence presented, but I mean, you have 3 young kids, and everyone has a right to have a firearm. Obviously, there's also some allegations that he had some of these weapons within reach of the kids. They may have known the gun safe code. There's some pictures of the kids with firearms that kind of came in as well. So, you have someone that maybe isn't the most emotionally mature, but also has access to some deadly weapons.
There are two theories about how she could have died. And again, we have no idea. We have no idea. One is that she was poisoned with hemlock based on some searches he made. And then the other one was that on that night that she disappeared, neighbors thought it was kind of weird that the kids were outside in the backyard until like 10 or 10:30 at night. And they're young kids and it's a school night, and that they heard like a popping sound. So there was a theory that maybe she was shot. But again, prosecutors were never able to really say with any clarity. And I think had she been shot in the house, it is possible, right, that there could have been some bullet fragments or something, and the house was searched multiple times, and none of that evidence ever came to light. So I have no idea. Right?
That's right. Yeah. So there was really no sort of manner and means of death in this case. And like you said, there was the vial of the hemlock poison, plant poison, which, I learned about as well. So
hemlock. Who has hemlock? It goes with spellcasters.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have the neighbor theory, and the kids are out. It's 10 o'clock, still San Diego, but it's cold, right? It's January. So the kids are out by themselves. The neighbors thought it was weird, and they got a recording of some sort of banging, loud noises. There is evidence of some sort of altercation, at least according to the neighbors as well. So whether it was gunshots, whether it was something else, I don't think we ever will know. But we do know that it was very strange for this whole thing to happen and how it went down. Because like you said, young kids outside on a cold winter's day, even in Southern California, lots of noise, right? And we know in domestic violence cases, oftentimes it's the neighbors that call, right? Because it gets so loud. And there was that recording, which was important evidence in the case.
Also important evidence was a security camera that picked up Maya coming home that day. So the last time she was seen alive was on a security camera on the afternoon of January 7th, 2021. She parked her Jeep on the street in front of the home at around 4:42 p.m. and then she goes into the house. Last time we see her alive. So prosecutors theorize that between January 7th and 8th, that's when they believe Larry killed Maya and then disposed of her body. So that's the window that we're looking at. On January 9th, shortly before midnight, Maya's sister, Mary Chris Dulé, called the Chula Vista Police Department to report her sister missing. She told officers that the family had plans to celebrate the 11th birthday of Maya and Larry's daughter with a trip to Big Bear. And there was a big family chat, messaging, getting everything ready for this trip and birthday. But where's Maya? Again, it's just out of the ordinary. So when family members couldn't reach her, that's when you started explaining this very weird thing that happens when the brother goes to the house. So Larry allegedly tells him, she's been locked in her room. And then, of course, he asked the kids, of course, and they've been virtual learning. And when they would do that, Maya would usually, oversee them pop in. But they hadn't seen their mom either. So it's like, I don't know, it could be between 1 and 2 days here where no one has really seen mom, but she's supposedly in the bedroom with the door locked and not coming out. And how could you not find that bizarre? I mean, wouldn't you have broken down the door by now?
Oh, no question, right? And that's why it's important. Everyone needs to know this is the pandemic, right? The kids, they're on Zoom all day. It was Zoom school. Look, I was working from home for a year and a half. I would do all my true crime podcasts on Zoom. And, that it really kind of changed things. But it was chaos in my house. There's one Zoom going in one room, one in another. There's no way anything would have gotten done without my wife helping the kids out. And obviously I was helping too. So it just didn't make any sense, right? For someone to be in their room, locked in their room, when you have 3 kids, at least 2 of them of school age having to do their homework, right? Virtually. So then obviously you have the family members who were concerned. And then again, Larry's behavior, just inconsistent, doesn't make sense, shifting stories, right? Telling the family one thing, telling law enforcement another thing. And I think that was really his downfall in this case because his story didn't make any sense whatsoever.
Oh, it made zero sense because, he goes ahead and he tells the police and I guess family that he had gone to the beach when you're talking about him backing up the SUV really early in the morning, that he took one of the kids to the beach.
I
But
think it's yeah, Solana Beach, which is sort of North County, San Diego. That was the story.
but it was cold. I
Yeah.
know it's California, but it's January. So it was like in the 60s and it was overcast and foggy. That is cold to
Yeah.
sit on a beach. And then he's gone, based on when he left the house and when the vehicle is seen coming back. It's something like almost 12 hours. Listen, kids
Yeah.
love the beach, but every parent out there knows there's no kid that's going to sit out there for 12 hours shivering. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, and I'm sure the East Coasters are going to think we're crazy, but in California, we do not go to the beach. We barely leave our house when it's 60. So yeah, the temperature didn't make sense. The timeline didn't make sense, 12 hours. And then, when he gets back, all of a sudden he says, hey, I got to detail my car. So then you have the cover up, right? He's asking neighbors to detail. I don't know if they have some sort of service, but, he's meticulously cleaning this car. Again, gives rise to the clear inference that he's cleaning up something in that vehicle.
And Larry wasn't charged for a long time. It was 9 months later that he was charged. And I remember early on in this case, the police saying flat out, the husband is not a suspect. I always found that so interesting.
Yeah, I don't know why they said that. First they said that, then they said he's a person of interest. And,
Right.
look, on one hand, you want law enforcement to be sort of transparent. But, and again, I recall because so many people were upset. There were national news outlets that were saying, like, where's Maya? What's going on? What is law enforcement doing? So I feel they, felt pressure to say something, but you don't want to say something like that when certainly it may not be true, especially when the family members are talking about this abusive relationship that they had.
Unless they did that on purpose because they wanted him to relax, put down his guard and perhaps make some errors. I don't know. Because it would have been suspicious from the very beginning, because if you have strangers searching for your wife, but you're not searching for her, that to me is really bizarre.
Yeah, and I understand why law enforcement doesn't want to make an arrest until they're sure they have their I's dotted, their T's are crossed. On the other hand, I could tell you that as a member of the public, it's concerning when you're leaving a murderer free. I mean, so many bad things can happen, right? One, they could obviously kill someone else. They can destroy evidence, obstruct justice, or they can flee. Now, maybe obviously he has young kids and they thought that he wouldn't, but it is problematic to wait too long as well, right? You don't want to jump the gun. You don't want to be premature and arrest someone because then those speedy trial, deadlines start running that clock. And if the defense thinks you don't have a strong case, they can really jam you up if you're a prosecutor. But on the other hand, I think waiting too long if you're law enforcement or the prosecution can be a potential problem as well.
So during those 9 months, they served 66 different search warrants. They interviewed 87 witnesses, and they followed up on what they said were 128 credible tips. They finally arrested Larry on suspicion of murder on October 19th of 2021. So it's at that point that they felt they had a better picture of what was going on in the marriage and how Maya wanted out, and they were able to piece these things together. Now, according to investigators, Maya began the process of separating from her husband as early as 2020, meaning it's not like she woke up that day and said, I'm calling a divorce lawyer. This really had been building for for a while. So she had told friends in December of that year that her marriage to Larry was definitely over. Part of her plan to leave her husband, Maya had actually been doing research, looking at local attorneys, trying to figure out how to calculate things like child support payments. So she was doing her due diligence. It's a whole new world when you divorce. So as she is kind of coming up with her plan, Larry is now becoming more erratic and he's getting more stressed out because it's becoming more real to him that she's going to leave him. So that's when he starts with the craziness of the spells and hexes. It's just the oddest approach to keeping your wife.
Yeah.
The defense, I did find this very plausible. The defense said, about these hexes and spells, they said this was a husband who was desperate to stay in his marriage and wanted to be married. I agree that it shows that. But that doesn't mean that he didn't kill her.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, especially you add the affair on top of it, and it's one of those situations where he probably thought, and again, I think it's a reasonable assumption. Yeah, if she's going to leave, if I can't have her, no one can.
No one can.
Right? And I think that, look, I think the defense did the best job with the hand that they were dealt. It's a tough case. I think they may have taken it a little bit too far. They said that it was actually Maya who was abusive. I didn't think that was particularly a good argument. But yeah, I mean, look, when you get into someone's thoughts, sometimes, defense attorneys, good ones, can really sort of explain that away. Look, this is someone who was going through a very traumatic experience. They thought they were going to lose their wife. They were going to lose their family. And this was someone who was desperate. Yeah, it made sort of no sense. They also argued that it was protected speech as well. But it was interesting because, we've seen it in some other cases. There was a case here in LA, the Jonathan Rinderknecht case, the alleged Malibu Palisades arsonist who the prosecution sort of got into sort of similar phone history into what was in his head. And the jurors didn't like that at all. And they almost acquitted him. It was 2-10 in favor of acquittal. So you do have to be careful if you're the prosecution to, if you have this sort of these intimate private thoughts put out in a way that sometimes that can turn off the jurors. But in this particular case, I think it was pretty clear that, he was very controlling. He was very jealous. And, when you want to incapacitate your wife in such a way that she can't even leave the house, that's going, that's going too far, in my opinion. That's not trying to save your marriage. That's not trying to have some emergency marriage counseling and therapy. This is the actions of someone, like you said, who's very agitated. And again, someone, in my opinion, who's prone to violence.
And desperate.
Yeah.
And people make very bad decisions when they are desperate. And, we always talk about what is basically like the inciting incident to the demise or the murder or the disappearance of a human being. It will be the secret's going to be revealed. She is going to leave. The money is due and I stole it and it doesn't exist and the whole world's going to know I'm a fraud. Yeah. It's when these things are revealed. And so he was so desperate and clearly not thinking straight. And that it was going on for so long with so much danger. I mean, with those kids in the house. And we're going to talk about that because in those 9 months in between, he was living with the children. And then when he gets arrested, his parents move into the house to take care of the children. And then Maya's family starts fighting in court for control and supervision of the children. And ultimately, the children end up going to Maya's family. And I saw this interview that one of her relatives did about how it wasn't easy when custody of the children was then transferred to Maya's family, because you have to understand they're just kids. So their mother is missing. The world is saying that, their dad did it. Now, I'm sure the grandparents are convincing them, your dad couldn't do this. And then the next thing you know, you're with the other relatives. I appreciated how candid they were to say that it wasn't easy and it hasn't been an easy transition.
Oh, I can't even imagine, Anna. So I'm a former prosecutor, but my wife actually is an attorney for foster kids. She's minor counsel in dependency court. So
Wow.
she deals with this all the time. Obviously, physical abuse, sexual abuse. I mean, terrible things. But yeah, I mean, in this type of case, if you're just looking at it from the kid's perspective, and in those cases, the standard is the best interest of the child. You know, I mean, they've lost both their parents, right? One of whom has been murdered, and the other will probably die in California state prison. So I can't even begin to imagine what those poor kids are going through. Now you have the grandparents fighting over custody, which is certainly understandable, but now these kids are being dragged through court proceedings, having to deal with social workers. I mean, it's just so tragic for those young kids, like you mentioned, Anna, to have to go through something like this. I can't even begin to imagine the trauma that they've experienced.
Yeah, and I'm sure that there's also a part of them where they're having a hard time believing it, especially with mom missing, because if you put yourself in the mind of a child, even let's say mom had died of cancer or something or a terrible accident, even though they may know mom is dead, in the brain of a child and in the heart of a child, what they always want is for that parent to miraculously, like a child thinks, to come back.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
and there's a struggle here.
Especially when dad and the defense are probably saying that mom just is missing, right?
Right, that mom is alive.
Yeah. So yeah, that's very, very difficult for them to cope with and grieve through because you have this hope, this false hope. Very sad.
Yeah, really, really bad. So at 4:39 on January 7th, minutes before Maya would arrive home, Larry messaged the spellcaster. So this would have been among the last of the wishes. Quote, make her realize that we are meant to be with each other. Make her miserable without me. Make her want to sleep on the same bed for all eternity. This is like a really bad, creepy fairy tale, right?
Yeah, it is creepy and weird. And I'm not surprised Maya wanted to leave. I mean, this is just bizarre behavior from a grown man. Again, I don't know this world. Hopefully, I never have to know this world, but this is just insane to me, Anna.
It is. And his last message request to a spellcaster would have been at 2:36 a.m. on January 8th. So what's unclear is if that was his last request, does that mean that was his final attempt before, he lost it? I don't know.
And if you really think your wife is missing, wouldn't you ask the spellcaster to
find her? Hello, bring her back.
Bring her back. Yeah, have her return home. Yeah, you got to kind of.
Here's my credit card.
Yeah,
find
exactly.
my wife, the mother of my children. No, that was not the spell or hex he needed.
Yeah, you got to keep that up if you're Larry in this case, and he did not.
So then Larry does not report to work on January 6th, 7th, or 8th. Again, these are the 3 days in which this is very important, which was unusual for him. He did send his boss, this I think is so bizarre, screenshots of the text messages between him and his wife about Maya wanting a divorce, and Larry's boss later told police it was if Larry was unraveling. Oh, he was unraveling.
Oh, there's no question. And I use the word insane. I probably shouldn't have because that's a legal term. Obviously, he wasn't legally insane, but there was a period of time where the defense tried to find him incompetent to stand trial as well. So the judge did find him competent. Competence is different from legal insanity. It's basically you have to be able to help with your legal defense. But at least there was some discussion, though, of whether Larry was competent to even stand trial, which really goes to show how desperate and what his mental state was at the time.
Now, his boss said that on the 8th, he couldn't reach Larry, so he called Larry's father out of concern. Larry's father tried to call Larry and left voicemail saying, Larry, please turn your phone on because Terry, your boss, is calling regarding your job. So that's very suspicious looking, unless, of course, unless she really had disappeared and left and then he was frantic, but that's not what he was frantic about, right? That's not what Larry was frantic about. So no witnesses can really account for Larry's whereabouts on January 8th. And his own story has been quite inconsistent. As we said, we talked about this whole going to the beach. So it's 6:45 a.m. He's seen leaving, going to the beach, which of course he didn't. And then we see, also there was that video of the SUV being backed in. That was the other day. So there's a lot going on here. So Larry leaves at 6:45 a.m., doesn't return until 6:06 p.m., about 12 hours. No proof that he went to the beach. They checked the cameras for the parking lot, didn't see. And for a period, this 12 hour period, his phone was turned off. Not only could you tell that forensically through digital analysis, but also your boss can't reach you and neither can your father. That may not be digital forensic, but that's just, that's confirmation. Larry has decided to disappear for a while. Then the car logs 445 miles that day. Where the heck did he go? So there was a lot of circumstantial evidence that pointed to Larry, and Larry did not do himself any favors. So he's finally arrested in October of 2021, and that is where he sat until his trial, and he's still behind bars. He's never been released. Now, I want to talk about the interviews that he did from jail, because when you talked about competency, and I understand there's competency at the time that the crime is committed and then to stand trial. You know what? Whether or not you liked his answers and they were not satisfying, he did seem to comprehend the questions and answer them. So he did 2 interviews with a local TV station in San Diego, one kind of over the phone, and then the other one, he sat there. The cameras were allowed in jail. And it was so interesting. This was his condition. And this is the kookiest thing I've heard. He didn't want his entire face revealed because he didn't want prosecutors to be able to read anything into what he's saying. Oh my gosh. First, you should listen to what you're saying because you're not making any sense. So the video is basically from the nose down, right? You don't see his eyes or the top of his head. And that's how the whole video interview is conducted. And he's saying, I think Maya's alive. She's coming back. And then, when he's asked the really tough questions, we'll answer that at trial. That was his answer, his standard. I can't believe that his attorneys let him do the interview. I mean, I'm glad they did for my purposes and for our purposes to make our own decisions. But wasn't that kind of kooky?
It was very strange. Certainly not a good idea. Not typical for a criminal defendant in a murder case to give that type of interview. It's usually a bad idea. And look, I do tons of media. I'm all about it, but not in a particular case like that. And ultimately, those statements could be used against him. And he never ended up testifying either. So probably not a good idea. Maybe they thought they had to sort of get out in front of the court of public opinion, which clearly turned against him. But ultimately, I think it was not credible and certainly not enough in terms of an explanation. Like you said, I mean, the mileage itself was very, very problematic. I was really surprised the car wasn't caught on some license plate reader somewhere. Obviously, that technology has developed more since 2021. But I mean, it just didn't make sense. From Chula Vista to the beach is not even 40 miles, much less. I mean, it's like probably like somewhere between 10 and 20 miles. So it didn't make a whole lot of sense.
And no, he didn't help himself, obviously. The only thing that I came to feel about him is kind of how I felt the same way. He's he comes across, I should say, kind of mild-mannered. He didn't lose it during the interview, at least what we saw. But he once again comes across as someone so ridiculously immature. Like this, just like this sad guy who didn't want to lose his wife and went to a spellcaster. That's the only thing that was reinforced for me was, what a sad guy he was. This is,
Well, you said desperate. I think that's a great adjective. You can maybe go so far as to say pathetic, and I would be
yeah.
surprised with any man or woman would want to be with someone like this that's just sort of begging you to stay and then not really treating you well. So, and it really showed during the interviews and the court appearances. Obviously, I wish the trial was televised. It was not,
Yeah.
unfortunately,
I know.
which is a bummer. Most of the time, California, these trials can be televised. The judge in this particular case put the kibosh on it. It is usually within the discretion of the trial court, but I think we would have all seen a lot more of how Larry really portrayed himself, even though he didn't testify.
Yeah, and I find it interesting that there were so many postponements that, this happened in 2021. He gets arrested 9 months later, but trial did not begin until May of 2026. There was a rather lengthy preliminary hearing to
Yeah.
decide if there was enough evidence to go forward, and the judge did decide that. So during that preliminary hearing, we got a lot more details about what was going on, and that was kind of helpful. I just, I don't understand why, especially if you're being held, you would wait so long for your trial. Wouldn't you want your trial sooner with because this guy clearly doesn't deal in reality, would have been thinking, oh, I'm going to get out. So let's get to the trial sooner rather than later because I'm just sitting here rotting.
I think part of it was the competence issue. The other was obviously the prelim took a long time. And frankly, I think the defense needed time to kind of prepare the case. I think the prosecution had more than 60 witnesses. So there was a lot to go through. Again, I don't think the result would have been different, whether it was quick or fast. It is the defendant's right to a speedy trial. And more often than not, when the defense asks for more time, saying they need to prepare their case, the judge grants that
Sure.
motion. Otherwise, it's an appellate issue potentially down the road.
So finally, opening statements began on May 18th. Again, a circumstantial evidence case. And, the motive was Maya wanting to get out. And what was really important was that 3 days before she went missing, Maya texted Larry. So these are her words. Quote, "I'm filing for divorce whether you like it or not." So, the aunt can say this, the sister can say that. Maya said it. And I think that that was very powerful. So Larry's defense was prevented from presenting a third-party culpability defense. That's always the look over there
Yeah.
defense. No, look over there. Something's happening there. But there was one that I thought was, and they did try to explore it, was could the man she was having an affair with have anything to do with this? And the defense claimed that he was not investigated as thoroughly, but he had the best alibi in the world. He was at the hospital with his wife who was delivering their first child.
Yeah, it doesn't get better than that, right?
Yeah.
The cameras there in the hospital. So, yeah, there's no real plausible alternate legal theory in this case.
Yeah.
That's the problem the defense had.
So Maya's coworker, her lover, testified. Jamie Laird. He said that their relationship started just as friends, then it became sexual. Now, he was married and expecting a baby, and it's my understanding based on the references in news media, I don't think he's still with his wife. Understandably so. You're delivering your baby on the same day you find out that your husband has been having an affair and the woman is missing. That is way too much stress for any new mom. It's right? I can't handle that.
I can't even imagine. Imagine the betrayal and then the embarrassment, right? The entire world knows that your husband, the father of your child, is having an affair with a woman that's missing or dead. I mean,
It's too much. It's too much.
Too much for any one person to handle, yeah.
So the jury deliberated for 5 hours. And as we said, they found him guilty. Juror number 3, who did the interview with the CBS station in San Diego, said this is what popped for her, that it was very suspicious that Maya had contacted a divorce attorney on the day she disappeared. And also, thought, okay, she has to be in the desert. And again, this is just speculation, but that's from the juror's point of view. So that's what bothered them. There are multiple things that bothered them. So even though he's been convicted, he hasn't been sentenced yet. He has a weapons charge that he has to return to court on July 20th for. And the search for Maya's body continues, and her loved ones are hoping and still working really hard to find her. So this case, as far as they are concerned, is not closed. It is time for our comment section. These are the crime cases that you all are talking about on social media. And here's our producer, Will Updike. Hey, Will, how are you?
Good. How's it going?
Super.
Nima, great to see you.
Will, love seeing you too. Great being on as always.
All right, so this week we have a case of an unlikely conspirator. This case comes out of Beltsville, Maryland, where a thief attempted to rob a bank with the help of a stolen cat. Not one that you hear every day. According to a local pet store there, Pet Supplies Plus, this whole scheme started on July 13th when a man stole a 3-month-old tuxedo kitten named Magnolia. Now,
what is a tuxedo kitten? I feel like an idiot.
A tuxedo kitten is like they're primarily black with sort of some white on their face and neck and chest, so it looks like a white collar shirt under
little bow tie
under the tuxedo.
No.
Yeah, exactly. It's very cute if you're a cat person, a tuxedo cat. Now, Some employees of this pet supply store actually said that this guy might have been milling around for a few weeks prior to this, and it seemed like this whole time he kind of had an eye for Magnolia, but apparently he wasn't looking to adopt this cat. He was merely looking for a window of opportunity, which allegedly came around 10:40 a.m. that morning of July 13th. Now, they say that after taking Magnolia, the reported thief walked to a nearby PNC bank for this alleged robbery attempt. Now, according to media outlets who haven't yet named this suspect, the purported thief had a very interesting sort of method for this alleged robbery. According to the Prince George County Police Department, once inside the bank, the suspect asked the bank manager to hold the cat. And while the manager is occupied, the would-be robber allegedly wrote a note to the teller demanding they hand over all the cash. Gotta be honest, not one I've heard before. Also very surprised that the bank manager was like, yeah, sure, I'll hold the cat, I guess, because that's my job too as the bank manager. So we don't have a whole lot of details on how this supposed robbery was eventually busted up, but police say this stick-up was unsuccessful and the man was arrested at the scene. Now, luckily, Magnolia also discovered safe in the bank manager's office. So he didn't continue holding her the whole time, but she did stay there around the bank. Now, some of this was sort of captured on security footage where the suspect, who was wearing a light-colored shirt and a black beanie, is seen running out of this Pet Supplies Plus store carrying the black and white cat before entering this bank that's actually in the same shopping center. After hearing about this catnapping, Stephanie Stolich, she's with the adoption agency Beltsville Community Cats, who kind of run the cat sort of adoption thing outside of this pet store. So she hears about this catnapping. She rushes over to the pet store to see what happened to Magnolia. And as she arrives, she sees all these cop cars, which are obviously there for the bank robbery. But she has no idea.
She thinks it's for the catnapping.
Yeah, she has no idea that that's going on. So she thinks, wow, this is a heck of a response for a stolen cat.
Wow.
Which, yeah,
My
they really.
kind of police department.
Exactly. They really gave it their all there. But eventually she realizes that the authorities are all going into this bank. And at some point they inform her that, yes, there is in fact a cat inside the bank. Now, while this suspect is behind bars, Magnolia is still looking for her forever home now that her life of crime is behind her. And Beltsville Community Cats promises that from now on, the only thing she'll be stealing are treats, toys, and cuddles. So let's hope that both alleged conspirators here learn their lesson after the feline felony. I thought this one was just wild. I don't know why we don't have the suspect named yet. This only happened a couple of days ago. I don't know how they do things there in Maryland with regards to releasing the names of people. But I mean, have you ever heard of a robbery like this with allegedly a stolen animal involved?
Well, a cat, like a kitten, that's the crazy thing, like bringing a big dog, maybe.
That makes sense. Yeah,
But
I would also
here,
think
hold
maybe.
the kitten, it's just...
I also would think maybe you'd throw the cat or something. Like you'd use the cat as more of a weapon.
Yeah, you think there's some sort of cat burglar. You send the cat in first,
cat
right?
burglar.
You know? But look, bank robbery, even with a note, because these are FDIC insured, these end up being federal cases. So it's going to be filed. Usually it's filed by the Department of Justice, U.S. Attorney's Office there in Maryland. So we'll probably know pretty soon.
And like the lack of a weapon, I mean, does that make it any less serious? It's still like a pretty big deal, right?
Yeah, it's still a federal crime. Obviously, the weapons under the sentencing guidelines, they tend to be enhancements. But even the note, that's robbery because you're making a threat and you're using that threat to steal money from the bank. So it is bank robbery, even if you don't have a gun, even if you're not using the cat as a weapon, that note by itself is sufficient.
Rough. Tough to get out of. We got a lot of comments on this one. Mark A said, "Are you sure Magnolia didn't give the suspect the idea?" Who knows? Cats are pretty mischievous. This guy was allegedly coming there a bunch. I mean, it could have been unfurling this plan for him. George P said he thought it was the perfect crime.
Yes.
Okay. And Nima already got to this one first, but Felix M said seems like he took the title of cat burglar literally. And then I'm going to end this one on just a nice comment from Pat K, who said Magnolia should still be locked up for stealing our hearts. So,
oh, little Magnolia. I would think the bank manager should adopt Magnolia.
Or the teller or somebody. We'll see what happens with that. But according to their Facebook post, the little Magnolia has not been adopted yet. But we'll see what happens with that. But that is going to do it for this week's comment section. I want to thank everybody who sent those in. You can, of course, do that over on our YouTube community page, and you can reach out to us across all social media at any time at My True Crime News. But that'll do it for me. Until next week, don't do crime.
Nima, it's just been wonderful to have you on the program. It's really been fun. I just appreciate your approach. You know, you're a hardcore, tough criminal, former prosecutor, defense attorney, all that stuff. So well, prepared and educated, but you're fun.
Thank you. I love it. And you're fun, Anna. So good to be on with you and Will. Such a pleasure.
Oh, so cool. So listen, Nima, I know you're new to the podcast, but obviously not to True Crime News, the television show on which you appeared many times. Where can people find you and follow you?
So I'm on all social media platforms, X, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, you name it. Nima Rahmani, tough one to spell, Neama, last name Rahmani, and my firm is West Coast Trial Lawyers. Give us a follow. Love talking about true crime.
Oh, so cool. So cool. I hope you come back. We would just love that. And you can find me at Anna G News, Anna with one N. You can find everything we do at My True Crime News. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Subscribe to our newsletter at truecrimenews.com. So until next week, this is True Crime News, the podcast. I'm your host, Anna Garcia. And as we say, crime never stops, and neither do we.